Hi folks, today I and you too now are in the Cascade Mountains, really high up above 5,000 feet. Now, if you are wanting to live up here in this extremely high environment that we would call alpine, you're going to have to be able to survive a whole lot of very dangerous factors, things like extreme winter cold, avalanches, landslides, even summer drought because it doesn't rain very much all the way up here at the crest in the summertime. Today, we're going to be taking a look at a tree that has the adaptations that it needs to thrive in this harsh environment. So today we're going to be talking about the Alpine Larch tree, also sometimes called the subalpine larch. It's the same tree, just different common names. People call them by different things. Before we get out in the field and look at this tree and its actual place in the ecosystem, right in one of the most extreme environments you can live in here in the Pacific Northwest, we're going to take a little bit of looks at some of the tips and tricks for identifying this tree. So first of all, one thing that's very different about larches compared to the other trees that we have here in the Northwest is the branches are going to be covered with little knobs. Those are going to be called spurs. Out of each one of those spurs is going to be a whorl of a couple dozen needles, sometimes up to 30 of them, all coming out of that spur in a big tight bunch. You're not going to find any other trees other than larches that have that many needles coming out of those little growths off the branches, so that's a pretty clear pattern. In the summertime, they're going to be kind of a yellowish green color, but when fall rolls around, that's when larches really shine because unlike a lot of other cone-bearing or coniferous trees, these are not evergreen. They actually are deciduous. They're going to lose those needles in the wintertime, and so they're going to turn the brightest yellow color, and you'll actually be able to see them sometimes from even miles away. They do have cones again, they're coniferous. They're going to be kind of woody, dark brown, and they're going to have little scales emerging, that kind of papery in texture, where the seeds are attached to, and those seeds are going to be very, very small and attached on a tiny little wing. So let's get out there and check out some of these beautiful alpine larches in their natural habitat. So here we are, and today we're standing in a forest of my friends, the Alpine Larch tree. This here behind me, this beautiful golden color, this is what you would observe in autumn. In the summertime, these beautiful trees are going to have kind of a bluish green looking needle, but this is a really interesting case here because, of course, this tree is a conifer. It's related to things like pine trees and Douglas fir and hemlock. All of those coniferous trees are kind of in the grouping of gymnosperms. And there aren't that many of them that lose their leaves in the winter, so having a deciduous conifer is very unusual. Of course, it's quite beautiful to look at, but why would this tree actually do that? And that actually is because of the place that we are right now. We are at Timberline, the place on the mountain where above it the conditions are just too harsh for any trees to grow. You might find shrubs growing above us in elevation. You might find thick forest below us, but right here, this is the last place that trees can actually grow in these mountains without being crushed by snow, without losing too much of their growing season because there's too much snow, or landslides, or any other of the things that might kill you up here on the mountain. So these trees are deciduous because it helps them to survive in that frigidly cold winter. And larches are actually kind of the super tree for that. Larches have been known to survive in temperatures down to negative 54 degrees Fahrenheit. That's really impressive for something that isn't able to wear Patagonia coats and very thick down fur. This tree has to make it through those temperatures all on its own. So the ability to lose its needles actually helps it with that. It means that it will not collect as much snow on its branches. That keeps it from splitting as easily. One might also notice that these are very skinny trees. They don't have a very broad spreading out shape, especially when they're young like this. And so that helps them to shed snow as well. Now, one final thing on here that helps them to survive that very frigid temperature is these are a pretty ancient lineage of conifer. And if you look very closely on these branches right here, you're going to notice that there's tiny little spurs. These are little wooden knobs that stick off the branch. And those are what the needles emerge from in the springtime. And those spurs can actually help protect the buds. Because of that, the alpine larch is actually able to send out new growth sometimes weeks before any of the other trees that are able to live up here at this high elevation point. Now, one thing with the alpine larch that is an issue is because it's really developed to live in this harsh environment, it doesn't do well with competition from other trees. It's so specialized to survive here. So it needs a lot of sunlight, and in places where other trees start growing and filling in, it can actually be outcompeted by those trees as they compete for resources. Fortunately, in a lot of alpine larch habitats, it's the only thing that can live there. They prefer kind of that very high elevation site with moist soil. One of their compatriots that you might find nearby is actually right here. This is a white bark pine. White bark pines generally prefer a little bit drier soil though, so you don't actually have the two of them competing that often in this high alpine environment. Now, in one place where you might see the alpine larch getting outcompeted, that would be with the arrival of mountain hemlock and subalpine fir, two species that might also grow up near timberline like this, but form much thicker crowns that are able to block out the light so that the larches can't get it. Those species are less able to survive fire. So in places where you get a little bit of fire moving through every couple hundred years up in these alpine environments, generally you won't see them encroaching too much on the larch habitat because alpine larches are one of the more fire adapted trees up at this elevation. They're able to come back after a burn a lot quicker than some of the other species. Even young alpine larches have adaptations that help them survive in this harsh environment. Now, we've already talked a little bit about how they grow very slowly. This tree right next to me here might be about 25 years old. It's been putting a lot of energy into its root systems, making sure they're extensive enough that it can survive the dry summers. But another feature of this tree is that the needles on the base here are actually evergreen, unlike the rest of the trunk on here. About a quarter of the needles might stay on during the winter. This doesn't happen on adult larches. Adult larches drop all of their needles, but this tree in particular, because it's so small, it wants to have a head start when spring rolls around and the snow melts next summer. That's another adaptation that young larches will use to survive in this deep snowpack environment. Now, there's one more adaptation that helps this larch survive in these really difficult climate conditions, and that is that this tree is actually immortal. What was that? No? Wait, stop. That's actually not quite true. What I meant to say is that this tree lives for a very long time. So alpine larches can live for over 1,000 years, and they grow very slowly up here. There isn't a very long growing season without snow. So these trees might be 25 years old and only about a foot tall, way down near the ground. What they're doing during that first 25 years is sending out an extensive root system to make sure that they can have enough moisture to continue surviving. Now, trees like this really large one back behind me, that's a ginormous mother tree. This tree here is probably well over 500 years old. And some of the trees that you'll find up here in the North Cascades are in fact over 1,000 years old. Now, these trees are very important, not only as a source of seed for new trees to grow from, but also as a habitat space. Old larches are often hollow on the inside, and that makes really good habitat for rodents, small mammals, birds, things that like to live inside of a sheltered place like a tree, especially with a harsh winter here. It's good to have that. So very impressive trees from that perspective of living for a very long time. Now for human uses. This tree, as we said before, does grow in a very harsh environment. It's very hard for humans to reach. Now, unfortunately, that isn't to say that human activity doesn't threaten these beautiful alpine larches. There's been a couple of incidences where ski resorts have actually cleared them in order to make better slopes, but most of the threats that are coming to the alpine larch from us are not actually very direct. The biggest one is going to be climate change. These trees, as we've mentioned before, really grow up above timberline or at timberline. They grow in some very specialized habitats and really depend on these harsh conditions to keep competition down. As the planet warms up, as we've been seeing since the mid-1800s, the snow line in the mountains is rising higher. We're seeing longer summers, shorter winters, and a lot of those other trees that grow at high elevations that might compete with the subalpine or alpine larches and make sure that they don't get enough sunlight, those trees are moving in. They're kind of growing up in this space, and that's something that we need to consider for the future of this tree. before we head back down the mountain, there's one more thing I want to talk about that involves this tree and how we as people can protect them so that they can live for thousands of years. So right now, I'm on a trail. I just came up to look at some of the alpine larches here, and I'm on one of the less traveled trails, but alpine larches have actually become a really big thing that draws people in to look at them. They're so beautiful in the fall. Tree tourism is a really big deal. Some of the trails up here near the crest of the North Cascades, where I am right now, can draw thousands of visitors in a single day. Now, that's really cool that people want to come see the trees, but what's really important to remember is staying on this trail right here, or whichever trail you're going to be on. Places like that have so many people visiting them end up getting highly impacted. People who walk off the trail actually often do a lot of harm. Even though they're good intentions, they're trying to appreciate those trees and the beautiful landscape. What happens when you step off the trail, especially in these alpine ecosystems that are already under such harsh pressure, is that those ecosystems can be very damaged. The soils up here high in the mountains are very thin, and when you step off the trail, you actually cause erosion and compression of that soil. When the soil gets compressed, different things can't grow there anymore. The roots of both the larch trees and some of these beautiful plants here like heather cannot live in compacted soil. So try to stay on the trail when you're going out to view these beautiful trees. The next time you're outside, take a look around for some alpine larch trees and think about how these trees connect you with the rest of the ecosystem.